What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be cutting the front bumper of our supercharged Dodge Viper in half. Stick around. Alright, so some of you may have seen on the feed that we got ourselves a new toy, the lift right here. Now, as I shared in the feed, obviously the city shut us down on doing our new shop, so don't really want to talk much about that. I kind of got screwed on that, but I did need some sort of lift because even though the Viper isn't always on our project list or being driven, it's kind of in the way a lot of times, and so I need somewhere to be able to put some of the other projects, which is underneath it, when I'm working on things. Even though it doesn't leave us a whole lot of room when we're making our videos, we at least need that room for storage. Now, I wasn't clickbaiting or messing with you when I said that we're going to cut the front bumper in half. We are literally going to cut this front bumper in half, but maybe not exactly what you think. We're going to be using that big, large sheet of aluminum right there to make a front splitter. So, if you look at this thing, I know this is going to probably piss off most of the purists out there, but it is what it is. This thing was previously red. This wasn't the original bumper to this car. You'll see there's a lot of small bits of damage on there. There was body filler at some point. I always hated this lower lip right here because it does nothing but scratch on the ground every time I go somewhere. It's super annoying. And I know what you're thinking. If you have a splitter coming out, there's a better chance of scraping. Yes and no, because we're going to cut that thing straight off, and we're basically going to be raising it 2 inches. So even though it won't really look like it, this thing looks kind of goofy when you look at it compared to the rest of the body, because it sticks down 2 inches farther than everything else, and it's pretty much just a blocker. Now, I'm no aeromotive expert or nothing like that, but I have to imagine that's not really good for, I don't know, wind turbulence or whatever you want to call it. So I think splitter will help, and it'll give it a little bit more aggressive look and kind of match the rear diffuser that we put on years back. So my plan is to go ahead and basically cut a lot of this section out here, to get rid of that obviously, and then we are going to make a custom cut or drawing right here on this sheet of aluminum to get everything fitted, and then we'll have it painted to match after we get it mounted. Now this particular unit, you'll see, we are going to set it up so it is mounted right into our frame. It's welded and bolted right to our frame, so it should be pretty stiff. Probably nothing like you'll be standing on, but it should be a heck of a lot stronger than the flappy lip that you see right here. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, and so moving forward, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this brand new blade here, and I'm just going to cut along the seam right here that you can see. And again, don't worry, this thing's already so badly damaged. There's cracks everywhere. It's pretty rough shape. And not to worry for those out there thinking, what if I want to go back to OEM? Well, they're only like $900 to $1,600 used. So yeah, there's that. But nonetheless, with all the cracks and stuff in this, I don't see this being a long-term bumper anyhow. So I don't necessarily mind cutting up just to play with a little bit. Even though I don't really want to replace it, at some point it may need to be replaced anyways, especially if these fascia cracks right here get any deeper, because if I push on it, you'll see that it opens up. So obviously not good. Nonetheless, I did notice that Gen 1s don't have this lower lip spoiler, so I would imagine maybe that holds it, maybe it makes it go faster, maybe overall speed, so it's not so much downforce. I'm not really sure the nature of it. I just think that the front splitter, the aluminum is going to look a lot better. So anyways, I'll stop yapping and get to the stuff. I'm going to go ahead and take this thing right now and cut a nice clean edge on here. And then I should be able to bend that backwards, assuming I didn't just break that, and pull that thing right off. So let me see how this works out, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, guys, so I went ahead and I spun the car around because the actual lift stops were blocking me from being able to work on the front bumper. So I spun it around. I finished cutting everything off that you'll see right there. And basically, here's where we're at. If you can see that. That's with everything cut off. Again, there's still fine tuning, obviously, to be sanded and be smooth, but I'm just kind of getting an idea. Do I want to keep these lips on? Do I want to have the splitter go around that? The other things I got to keep in mind too is keeping it level. Now, because the spoiler, or the front lip spoiler, it kind of curves up. If I put a flat piece there, it's going to have a big gap. It's not going to look very good. So I've got to make sure I can raise it as high as I can. So I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to put tabs on here to come out on both sides. That'll also accommodate with these side panels here that'll all line up to make sure that this thing bolts in smoothly. And so I think what I'm going to do right now is probably come out with a design out of cardboard to see what I like. I don't know if I want the spoiler in the center or the splitter to come out too far. I'm thinking I almost kind of want the bat wing to kind of come out like this, because this is already, if you guys are familiar with these cars, these front bumpers, the lower lip already sticks out quite a bit. So I'm not trying to go crazy. This isn't going to be a time attack car or nothing. So I'm keeping it kind of basic here, but I'm going to go through that, figure it out what my design is, and I'll be right back. All right, so there we have kind of an idea of mock-up of actual flatness for that bumper from side to side. So now what I need to do is I need to take a flat iron like this here, and I need to line it up with my frame to figure out exactly where I'm going to put these brackets on the side here and here to make sure that when that lip splitter comes out of the splitter, it's going to be flat and smooth and hold as close to this bottom as I can get it to hold. So that said, I got to go ahead and do some markings. However, another thing to note is the frame posts do sit a little bit lower than the front bumper here, so we have that to deal with too, so those will be cutouts. So I have obviously the design, we have to figure out what cutouts are going to be cut so this thing could sink into where it's supposed to be. All right, so I use my straight edge along the bumper to get my exact markings where I want the splitter to sit. Went ahead and put a piece of tape on there and marked it, obviously, and now I got my actual gauge, and I'm gauging it to be about 17.5 millimeters from basically the bottom of this to the top of, or what the bottom of the ankle bracket we'll be putting up there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my ankle bracket down here. I'm going to cut it to my exact size. We'll have a piece on the outside. We'll also have a couple smaller pieces on the inside too, because again, this frame notch sits lower, so it's going to have to be notched out. Therefore, I want to have supports on both sides of this to make sure that the splitter's not flapping around, because it's kind of important it to be stiff as possible. So let's go ahead and mark that stuff out. We'll move forward. All right, so I'm kind of going back and forth. I was looking at it and realized that if I try to run this unit to where the current screws are that hold the front bumper on, it'd be a little bit higher, closer to like 31 millimeters. And then I started thinking, I really don't want to modify this chassis if I don't have to, because what if I decide I don't like the splitter, I want to take it off? Then I have a modified chassis that I have to live with. So really what I should be doing is probably modifying the splitter to fit. Now we have an aluminum welder, we can weld any kind of bracket on it we want. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is what I originally said. I think I'm going to go back to the drawing board and I'm going to go ahead and map out where these areas are, knowing that these things sit lower than the splitter. I'm going to get those things cut out. I'm going to shape exactly how I want it. I'm going to cut it out on the splitter, and then we're going to fit the splitter here and figure out exactly what we have to do to modify the splitter to fit. I think that's a smarter approach, and obviously less, I don't know, damaging on the frame of the actual unit that's actually important. So let's go back to the drawing board. I'm going to start cutting this stuff out. I'll show you exactly what I come up with. All right, so there you'll see we have our first outline and edging of our front splitter. Now, essentially what I did was I went ahead with it underneath the car and essentially drew out the way I wanted it to look on one side. And in order to get that exact same side on the other side, I went ahead and took paper, taped it together, and went ahead and outlined the paper, basically looking through the paper, the line, cut it out, and then laid it on the other side, and you'll see that we'll have an exact matching side on the other side. So there is the front of our splitters. Now it's time to get that part cut, and then we're going to get working on the centers being cut out and the frame notches being cut out and getting this thing mounted up. All right, so I got the whole thing cut out as far as the face was, and I was able to actually use a jigsaw, as you see right here, with a bimetal cutting bit. There is one trick, and that trick right there is WD-40. And what I mean by that is you'll be cutting this thing, you'll get about 3 to 4 inches, and it'll just stop. It's not locked. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's heating up or if it's starting to heat up and grip the actual metal that's building up on it as it's cutting, but you'll have to spray a little bit on the actual blade itself every 3 to 4 inches. Now that might be self-explanatory to some people. To me it made no sense because I've cut other metal like this before and I had a problem. Maybe it's the type of aluminum that I have, I don't know, but it was binding up, and again, that was the hero in the situation. So nonetheless, we got that face cut out. I'll have to take a sander to it and kind of do the edges just to make sure it is perfect. I'll probably do that in the end. I'm not worried about that right now because we have plenty of cutting out to do still. So I'm going to set this on the car, kind of see how it looks like, how it lines up, and then we'll start marking out the areas that have to be cut out on the insides. All right, so here's kind of a shot from top down. Can't really show you the front forward yet because it's not cut out right, but that gives you kind of an idea of what it looks like. Looks pretty good so far. So again, we're going to move forward. We're going to start cutting out this bottom here and getting this thing so it sits level. All right, moving forward, we got the wheel well area cut out and the 2 frame posts cut out. So now again, I'm going to fit it to the car itself, and I'm going to figure out what we got to do with these little winglets right here. We're going to keep them, we're going to cut them out. Are we going to cut this or we're going to cut that? We're going to cut something. All right, so as you can see, our cutouts are good for their frame rails, and I think what I've decided to do, and I didn't want to do this, I thought it'd look cool with that thing popping through the bottom, but by doing that, I could probably cut this over and down so it was just a thin slit going through there. I don't want to compromise rigidity with this, and I think just to keep this foolish tore up little lip is probably not the best choice. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut these off. I didn't want to, but really at the end of the day, I think it's the smarter choice, and for aerodynamics, it's probably better serves its purpose. Plus, these things are what's getting it so low and making it ground out and everything, so I'd rather get rid of that anyhow. So, for now, I think, Viper, you're getting sliced. Let's move forward. All right, and I present to you no lower, whatever they're called. Now let's get this aluminum on here and see what it looks like. All right, so I'm starting to wish I had 3 of those things right there because I need something to hold the other ends up for you guys to be able to see from the front without it being bolted in. But it does look good. However, I do have some trimming to still do. You kind of see where it's hitting right there. So that means I got to cut out there just a little bit more. Same on this side as well. You'll see kind of where it hits there. Got to shave that so it's a little bit flatter, but we're getting pretty close. All right, guys, so check it out. It's overall looking pretty darn good. I really like the way it's turning out right now. Again, I wish I had a couple more things to hold this up to show you. But we're going to start lining things up, get some bolt holes made, and figuring out our brackets. All right, so there you'll see how the frame rail just kind of notches down and underneath it. Again, I haven't sanded any of the edges or anything. I'm not doing the finishing touches yet. I'm just kind of fitting everything in. I would really like to use the factory bolts so that run across here. It'd be nice because not only would it support this, it would keep the bumper in place so it wasn't fluctuating. I wouldn't have to worry about it cracking as much as well. Again, if this works out, I'll probably keep this bumper in when I paint this thing. We've talked about it before. Yes, it's getting painted. It'll give me a better chance to get that thing looking right. Now, one other thing I have to do on the sides over here, if you look, you'll notice that there's a plate down there. There was a couple areas where the bolts went through. It's kind of angled a little bit. You see it kind of sloping down. I don't know if I'll keep that or not, but what I have here is some riv nuts. And essentially what that is basically a rivet and a nut mixed in one. So I got a tool that'll put this up inside that plastic back there. It'll tighten it down so there's a bolt ready to go right inside it. So we don't have to worry about locating any factory bolts over here because we'll have something even stronger than what we had before. So I'm gonna get to marking that out and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, guys, so again, I had a lip right here that I had to remove. I went ahead and cut it off along the edges, as you can see right here. There's one from both sides. Now, normally I wouldn't have cut this. The reason I did was, and I've shared this before, this vehicle actually is a salvage rebuilt title because it was a theft recovery and there was some front end damage. And as you can see on this unit here where the fiberglass was kind of chewed up, which was right here, I actually just cut along that seam, so it kind of worked out for me. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have ever cut those. Even though I really didn't mess with much of the structure on it, it's still really solid and heavy duty. I can't even hardly move it. We're gonna go ahead and move forward now, and I'm gonna try to get this plate back underneath here and see how I can line it up to figure out how flat I can get it and figure out where I'm gonna start attaching this thing. All right, moving forward, you can see I have all my pilot holes that are gonna be drilled right here, and then all the way around the front and down the other side, okay? And what's gonna happen is I'm gonna drill a pilot hole on those, and then I'll end up pulling it out, and then we're gonna insert inside the body a riv nut. So basically what this does is this goes, if you can see that, this goes basically up into the body, and then a bolt basically tightens this down and widens this thing out so it flattens these outer edges on the back side. Especially important when you're doing it into like a urethane bumper because it can't just have a regular rivet where it's just barely bent out like this. It needs to have this flat surface kind of bent out so you really hold on to it and it can't rip through that urethane without really having an impact. So I've got, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the front, and then I've got 8 in the back. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna weld some aluminum channel. I'm sorry, some, I don't know, call it channel, but L bracket inside and out, and those will bolt actually to the side of the frame members here. And so this thing should be pretty darn solid when I'm all said and done. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop this thing now. I'm gonna start lining everything up again. I'll start drilling the pilot holes, and then we'll get these rivets in. All right, guys, so here's the tools that we're working with. To start, we're using a 27/64 drill bit, which is about the size of the tip of the riv nut that's going in. And then we'll have a 19mm socket, a 10mm impact, and then you'll see what we have right here is essentially our M8 bolt. I have a couple washers that are holding it nice and tight, and then again that 19mm nut. And basically what's happening here is as you slide this up in, you hold this nut on there. Once it tightens down, it kind of gets its own grip. And then you'll see how it just kind of pancakes out, and that's the reason these are better than a regular riv nut. Where riv nut only, you know, it may squish out 1/8 of an inch. We're getting a 1/4 inch all the way around on this thing, so this is the reason we're using those. So I'm gonna go ahead drill everything out. I'm gonna pop these in. I'm gonna use this tool to tighten them down, and we'll see what it looks like. All right, so there you'll see I got the very first one in. You can kind of see how that's clamped down there. Now for the fiberglass here, I actually had to use a little bit bigger, but I had to use a 29/64 just because where the body kind of widens out, it wouldn't push through this thing because it's so hard. Now where the urethane should be easy to slide in, this one not so much. So I got a few more to obviously do. I'm gonna get those all done. Again, I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so moving forward, again, we have all the holes drilled. All the rivets are in the front bumper now, or the riv nuts. The only thing we didn't drill is the very hard one, and the reason why is we have to put an L bracket coming off the back of the wheel well housing. And I want to make sure that's set perfectly, so I waited to drill that until I had that bracket on. But for now, what we have to do is do a little bit of aluminum welding. I don't claim this is going to be great, and you guys have seen my welding before, so we don't really need to talk about that. However, I have this May 250, whatever it's called, yes welder down here, And I've welded some things and it's actually worked. I'm not cleaning this thing the greatest. As you can see, I used acetone and I didn't really rough it up real great, so I didn't expect great results. But nonetheless, this crap's gonna hold, and I'm gonna weld it right now. Let's see how it turns out. Alright, so as we figured, the welds are super ugly. In fact, I had a lot of problems with our welder. It's kind of strange because I had it all dialed in, and then I didn't use it for a long time, and somehow the settings kind of reset themselves. I'm not sure if that's a thing or if from not using it does that, but somehow they got reset. I don't know what the settings are on this thing. It's like, I'm not going to say it's Chinese because it's not, but like, I don't know what it means. So I was trying to dial those in, but the biggest problem I was having is, you can see I had a feeding problem. And the problem ended up being is that this tensioner unit here is way too tight. So once I figured that out and stopped doing all that, I mean, it was kind of too late. It was at the last weld. So then I just have to figure out what to dial in for that 1/8 inch aluminum that I have. But like I said, I can grind it down. They're ugly, but they're going to hold, obviously, so I'm not too concerned with that. I just got to grind it down, make it look a little bit better. And then I guess we'll move forward. Alright, so the welds cleaned up pretty good. I didn't make them perfect, but they're a heck of a lot better than they were, as you can see. We're moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily bolt this thing in. I want to see how everything lines up. I want to see how well the ends are being held, and whether I'm going to add the extra bracket or not. I probably will, but just to be safe, I want to see how it holds as of now. And then I need to figure out where to drill and how to drill these into the frame itself. So we're moving forward. Let me bolt this thing on and show you what it looks like. Alright guys, so as you can see, it's well fitted now. If we get in close, it's actually pulled the bumper down to make sure these things don't get split open. I really like that. It's very, very, very firm. I do want to put the end brackets on of some sort because you'll see it'll close that small gap right there. But you're not going to necessarily step on this. But man, it's got a lot of sturdiness to it. It looks really good. I was really, really happy the way it came out so far. I still haven't debated what I'm going to do with this. I'm thinking initially I was going to bolt it from the sides, as you'll see. Then I thought maybe I'll just weld a plate across the bottom and put one bolt upwards. I don't really want to drill into the frame, but I do need a small bolt to at least hold it back. I probably don't need it, but it does have flex right there, and I don't like that. So I got to do something to make that stiff. Maybe closing this gap here will do that. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I'll probably weld some kind of weird angled bracket from here to here. I think it'll look fine, but like I said, this is definitely doing its purpose. It's probably going to be hard to see on the camera here, but it just goes with the car so much better than the original, the way the bumper came down, in my opinion at least. So I'm gonna get those little things buttoned up. We got to get this thing taken back off, sanded down on the edges, then we have to paint this thing obviously before reinstalling, and we'll see what it looks like when it's all finished. All right, so moving forward, I'm going ahead and I'm making these brackets right now. As you can see, the welds are actually getting better. There's still no professional weld, but that's definitely a lot better than what you saw yesterday. So I'm working it out. I'm just kind of getting used to the flow. Welding aluminum is definitely different than steel. Steel, you kind of feel it push. Where aluminum is so much softer, you just kind of have to go by the sound, it seems like, more so than feel. But it's getting better, so I can't complain. That's probably one of the best welds I've ever done with aluminum, so you guys seen my welds, you know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, I gotta put the top brackets on over here, and then I'm gonna put this thing back on, refit it again, and we're gonna paint it. Alright, so it's time to move forward. I went ahead and wiped everything down with some gasoline. You can use acetone, alcohol, whatever you want. You want to get the oils off the piece of aluminum if you can. Again, I'm going to be painting it. And remember, I used WD-40 all over it to help lube the blade when I was cutting it. So we want to make sure all that's off. Then I went ahead and hit it with the sanding pad like you see right there. It's somewhat fine. Enough to get a little bit of texture but not see after you paint it. That's okay because we're using texture paint, so it doesn't really matter. But you want to go ahead and sand it, and then I'll wipe it down one more time with some gas, let that dry, and then I'm going to use the paint that I normally use after I go get some more, which is this truck bed coating here. I like it because it's texturized almost like sandpaper in a way. It gives it a good touch, and it kind of gets rid of any little imperfections. You guys have heard me talk about this before. Now, I use this all the time, and the downside to that is I think they figured out that I use it all the time because they literally doubled the price. So they used to be $8 to $10 at the average parts store. I think it was 8 at Lowe's and 10 at like Advanced Auto. And now Advanced Auto is 18 and Lowe's is 13. So Lowe's is still so far the cheapest place to buy this stuff. I mean, it is a tall can, but they're kind of waxing people on this stuff. You can get it at Harbor Freight as well. So if you guys are near Harbor Freight, they do sell this as well. Very, very good stuff. And it doesn't need primer and it does not chip off. So it's a really, really good option for something like this. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and wipe this thing down one more time. Like I said, we're going to throw this thing in the backyard because I'm not moving the car and everything out. Just spray paint a little bit of spray paint. So we'll do it in the backyard. We'll see how she turns out. All right, guys, so it's time to hit this thing with some paint. Let's get at it. And as you can see, the paint is almost completely dry and ready to go. There's still some wet spots, as you can see. It'll be dry here soon enough. We're gonna throw this on. Now, some of you also probably noticed I didn't completely paint the top half, and there was actually 2 reasons for that. One, obviously, it's a waste of paint at $13 per can. It took almost 2 cans, just what I did. But more importantly, the reason I didn't go all the way back on the top was because that's the part that's going to be sitting up against the bumper, so I really don't want to put that really nice paint that we're going to be putting on that car and have it all tore up by basically sandpaper, which is kind of what that's like. So let's go ahead and throw this thing on. All right, guys, and there you have it. It's fully installed. Everything's checked over. Everything is stiff. Tons of resistance. When you push on it, it does not want to move, which is fantastic. You see at the very bottom right there, I've got a bolt holding each of the rear panels on. And then what I did with the back corners, I have a 90-degree piece of angle basically welded onto it. You can see there's one bolt holding it in. So this thing is, I ain't kidding you, I'm pushing hard right now. It's not even moving. So I think overall it turned out pretty good. Let's go ahead and lower this down, give you a better idea what this thing looks like from afar. All right, there you guys have it. That is the finished product, and I'll be honest with you, I really like the way it came out. I think it gave it a nice modern touch, and all in less than $100. And not only does it look good and give it a little more modern touch, it actually is functional, where I can almost stand on the lip of this thing. Now, I know there are some other options out there for people that you can buy online, but I don't really like the way they look. They're expensive, and they can have these kind of weird brackets in the front, kind of makes it look like NASCAR-ish. Not really my thing. I did think about putting little winglets on the side of this, but I thought, that's too much. I like the clean, straight look. It matches the rear diffuser that I built with the same exact paint. I think it just goes well together. Now, this isn't a full kind of reveal, I guess you can call it, because the car really needs paint. That's why it's still so basically filthy. There's a lot to come. That's why you'll see the wheels are filthy as well. There's things that are going to happen to those as well. I'm not going to spoil all that. You'll see that in the future. But a lot of you guys were asking for more Viper content. And for those of you that are okay with cutting up and ripping up and making a Viper not so much OEM, this was for you. I hope you guys appreciated it. Now, if you guys aren't already subscribed, definitely hit that button. And if you like this content, definitely hit the thumbs up, because obviously that helps keep this channel going. That said, that's a wrap, and I'm going to see you on the next one.